It's time to change your plans. Mercury is stationing retrograde tonight on Sunday, the day that you're watching this, and we start this week off with the most frustrating Mercury retrograde of the year. So let's go ahead and get started talking about it. By the way, if you're watching this on Sunday, August 4th, I'm still running my Mercury retrograde calendar sale. If you haven't downloaded the transit calendar yet, it's a fucking awesome tool that I literally use I use it every single day to know what transits are hitting my personal planets at any given time. This next 12 months, guys, is the biggest change that you're going to see in your lifetimes in terms of astrology. So make sure you stay up to date with how it's going to be affecting you. Get the calendar. We have it for $5 off over on my website. And that sale ends this Sunday night. So if you're watching this on August 4th on Sunday, when Mercury's retrograde, that's when the sale ends. So make sure you guys get it before that ends. Welcome back to the Astrology Report. My name is Cam White. This time we're talking about August 5th through August 11th of 2024. If you don't know me already, I'm a professional astrologer. I've been doing this for over 8 years. I've literally done almost 1,000 videos and I've seen literally thousands of clients. So if you're into knowing what's going on with the astrology, make sure you subscribe below. Comment, let me know what you're looking forward to this week and how you're going to handle this week, because the Mercury retrograde that we have going on is going to be really frustrating. The good news is this week is not the worst. Those are the next 2 weeks. This week is the opportunity to change your plans and to get comfortable with the changes. So when we get to the next 2 weeks, all of the disruptions don't absolutely mess up your plans. So we start Monday off with the moon. While it's in Leo, fresh off of a new moon, it's starting to gain in some light. So things are building up. And the moon is going to be at the end degrees of Leo, and it's going to make a square to Uranus. Then the moon will ingress into Virgo, and it's going to make a conjunction with Venus and Mercury. And Mercury is now retrograde. Mercury went retrograde really late in the evening on Sunday, so it may not be until Monday morning when you really see it. And when you double on Mercury being retrograde and the moon squaring Uranus, things are going to feel a little crazy. Things are going to feel a little bit more disrupted than usual. You have to understand that this feeling is going to continue for the next 2 weeks. Like if you're going into these next 2 weeks thinking like, oh, it's just going to be Mercury retrograde, I'll be fine. It's really not. And I'm not saying that to like put fear or doom into you. It's to understand what is in front of you. The way to do this Mercury retrograde, and this is what I talked about in my Mercury retrograde video, and if you haven't seen it, make sure you check it out, is if you are expecting everything to just go right the first time, you're going to be disappointed. And it's really easy for ourselves to have these high expectations and goals of what we want to achieve. But if you loosen up that expectation a little bit and you experiment and you try new things without being afraid to fail or without being afraid to maybe do some things wrong so you can learn, that's the way to get through this Mercury retrograde. You're going to have to do what you're going to have to do anyway, right? Like we can't just pause everything in our lives because the astrology isn't all that good. Mercury being retrograde is a time to say, you know what? We're just going to throw shit at the wall. We're going to see what sticks. We're going to make some mistakes. Things aren't going to go according to plan. But when you have that expectation, you relieve that pressure off of yourself for things to go perfectly. And how much nicer is it to go through something without all that pressure of everything having to go perfect the right way, especially when we can look at the next few weeks and say, hey, things are going to get crazy. Why don't we take that pressure off ourselves, have a little bit of fun with this and experiment. And so then when things do go wrong, it's not like the end of the world. You know what I mean? So the moon will square Uranus. There's a little bit of an emotional disruption going on Monday. The moon's in Leo. We're feeling confident. We're feeling proud. It squares Uranus. Again, that one little tiny thing can just kind of like make or break us. As the moon goes into Virgo, though, this is when we get a little bit more specific. This is when we get a little bit more into the details. And what's interesting to me is the moon goes into Virgo and conjoins Venus and Mercury now that Mercury's being retrograde in Virgo. So this really is activating a lot of the Mercury retrograde stuff. My question is, can you handle the change and can you embrace the problems that are in front of you? Can you have a good attitude about it? And can you have that sort of, you know what, we're going to figure it out anyway. Yeah, it might be a shit show, but again, if we take that pressure off, we take those high expectations off and learn to have fun with it, this Mercury retrograde can be an awesome time of experimentation. My other piece of advice with the moon in Virgo and Mercury retrograde in Virgo and Venus in Virgo is try not to be too anal, okay? Like we really want to be specific oriented, but Mercury being retrograde, it's just the details are going to be a lot more difficult to manage and to get the right way that you want. So just try not to be too anal. And then we get to Tuesday, and the moon is going to still be in Virgo, and it's going to make a square to Mars and Jupiter. And the good news is we don't even have time for details. Things are moving too fast, and we have too much information to take on that you're going to just have to do what you can do and not worry about the tiny specific things. Later on next week, when we have the Mars-Jupiter conjunction, this is kind of a big blow up and an explosion. And I really feel like this moon making a square to Mars and Jupiter is going to activate that a little bit. And what I look at with Mars in Gemini, Mars is, action oriented. It wants to do things. It is about fights and conflicts, and it's in Gemini. Gemini wants to move fast. It's an air sign, right? And it's also with Jupiter, it's going even faster. There's even more of a buildup. And the moon in Virgo wants to be a lot more precise and specific and to have everything that it kind of needs. And you're just not going to get that. Mars and Jupiter are in the superior position here. Now, when you look at a planet, like when you look at aspects and a planet is in a superior position, that planet takes authority over the situation. However, because this is the moon is saying like, well, let me just do this, or let me just at least get this one little tiny detail. Whatever you can squeeze in, but understand that speed is the name of the game here and not having everything according to plan the way that you want. You might feel overwhelmed. You might feel frustrated. Again, like especially if you're one of those people that get like annoyed when people are pressuring you to move faster than maybe you want to, it's going to be a little bit frustrating. But this is the time to not really worry about that. Say, you know what? If you can just grab one or two things, get things kind of handled in speed. The way I almost look at this is like an evacuation order. Right now in Colorado is the day I'm recording this. There's 2 fires up by Lyons and near Loveland. And people had like 5 minutes to evacuate, and they were able to grab 2 things and they had to go. That's kind of the name of the game here, where, maybe, you want to grab something like, maybe important documents or something like that, but you can't grab everything. You can't spend 20 minutes going through your house, rummaging through things, because before you know it, there's a fire outside your house and now you're stuck and you're going to die. And then we get to Wednesday, and we have actually quite a bit going on Wednesday. We're going to have the moon still in Virgo, making an opposition to Saturn. Then we get our first highlight of the day, and that's going to be the sun making a sextile to Jupiter. This is nice. It's not the biggest and the best transit ever, but I think adding on top of all of the frustrating things, this is actually pretty nice to have. Then we're going to have the moon at the later degrees of Virgo make a trine to Uranus, and then Mercury, now that it's retrograde, is going to conjoin Venus, and this is another one of our highlights for this week. And I talk a lot about the Mercury-Venus conjunction again in the Mercury retrograde video. But my issue with the moon in Virgo going opposite Saturn is always feeling like you're missing something. Like, okay, the moon in Virgo is tinkering and getting all these details, and Saturn in Pisces is like, what am I not doing? Like, I feel like I have something that I'm supposed to do and I can't remember it. Let's say you're evacuating out of your house because there's a big fire, and you get all your important paperwork and you're like, I'm missing something. And it's like your fucking pet or something like that. Maybe it's not that, crazy. Like, I don't think you guys would forget your pet. Most of you would grab your pet before you grabbed any of your important documents. But there is this air of like, getting so into the weeds and getting so specific that you miss the forest through the trees. That's the way I've really looked at this moon in Virgo opposite Saturn. And the thing is, that's going to take a second. The biggest thing is to take a step back and to not like focus in on things. Now, as the sun makes a sextile to Jupiter, this is an air of confidence, right? The sun is still in Leo. Like, if you can tap into a little bit more of that confidence, it's much easier to do right now. The sun is willpower. The sun is vitality. It's in Leo. Like, what's stopping you from stepping into any sort of like a Leo vibe right now? Like being confident, being bombastic, and maybe even being arrogant at times. A lot of you could probably even use a little bit of that arrogance and that self-indulgence. And as the sun sextiles Jupiter, if Jupiter is about faith and opportunity and belief, it is in detriment in Gemini. However, Jupiter in Gemini is still kind of like it almost reminds me of like positive affirmations. Like, sure, it's not actually changing like your mind on things, but it's a little tiny seed. It's chipping away a little bit at a time. And that sun sextiling Jupiter is like, you say a positive affirmation long enough, you start to actually believe it. One thing I've done a lot is I genuinely believe I am always at the right place at the right time. And that has never failed me saying that. I've been saying that for like years, and it just ends up happening. I just end up being presented opportunities. It's one of those beliefs that just like, it doesn't harm me at all. You know what I mean? Now, we do have the moon in Virgo, then making a trine to Uranus. I love this for unexpected solutions via tinkering with things. Like the moon in Virgo is very like, let me just try this little thing or try this little thing. And, with Uranus being about unexpected situations, destabilization, but this is a trine, so this is a positive thing. It's like it's like fucking around and finding out, but in the more positive sense of like, hey, let me just try this, let me just tinker with this, and hey, lo and behold, you actually create a solution that you weren't necessarily expecting at first. But as Mercury, again, we get to this other highlight on Wednesday, as Mercury is retrograde, making that conjunction to Venus, you have to kind of lean into enjoying things that you may not like. Or I should say, enjoying things that on the surface may not seem enjoyable at first. There's a lot to talk about with like Venus and Scorpio about pleasure through pain and like pleasure through sacrifice and things like that. But Venus in Virgo is like, it's just uncomfortable. It's kind of like, let's say you're trying to look really good, but you're a little bit overweight than you usually are. You have like a suit or let's say a dress and it's a little bit tight and you've been outside in the sun in a wedding and so you're kind of sweaty. That's like the Venus in Virgo vibe of just kind of like, ugh, like I'm just slightly uncomfortable. I really don't think I look that good right now. And the thing is, confidence is not a look. Confidence is an energy. Confidence is a vibe. And I look at Mercury retrograde conjoining Venus as, okay, like, can you change your opinion on what you enjoy? And with Venus, now that it's fallen, it's like, we're not going to enjoy the stereotypical things that we typically would. It's like, we have to lean a little bit into enjoying uncomfortable situations. But that's where growth happens. Like, here's the deal. This is a frustrating month. And I get really sick of everyone being like, oh, the astrology is always bad. It's like, it's literally what you make of it. It really is. This is not a fucking victim game. This is not like, if you want to use astrology to blame all of your problems on, be my guest, but you're not going to go anywhere. And you're going to be one of those people that are really annoying and that no one likes because you blame your life on everything around you. All this is doing is setting up the context for something, right? The context right now is there is a lot of frustration. There are a lot of things going awry. But are you going to just be like, oh, woe is me, things never go my way? Or are you going to say, you know what? This is a challenge. I know that I can overcome this challenge, and this challenge will make me the person that I want to be. Have you ever looked back in your life and all of the hardest situations that you hated in the moment as you got away from them through time? You look back and you can be grateful for those situations because they made you who you are today. That's how I want you to look at this time in your life. Like, yes, it is very minuscule. It's all like Mercury retrograde stuff. And we'll get to the bigger life stuff here in the next 2 weeks. But the thing is, you just have to take this and say, you know what? I can do this. I can get through this. How can I have fun? How can I accept and embrace this challenge? Because I know that I can overcome this and I know that I could be better from this. Like, that's the fucking thing I want you guys to walk away from during this energy. So then we get to Thursday and the moon will make an opposition to Neptune, like really, really early in the morning. Like I'm talking like 1, 2 a.m. And then the moon will ingress into Libra and it's going to first make a trine to Pluto. And then throughout the day, the moon is going to conjoin the south node. My biggest advice for this moon in Virgo going opposite Neptune, don't stay up too late. You stay up too late, you're going to start overthinking situations, creating scenarios and stories that don't exist. And you're going to be like, just kind of spiraling. Don't do that. Just go to bed. Go to bed on Wednesday night at a good time. And then you won't be overthinking everything. And then you'll wake up and the moon will be in Libra and your problems are solved. Or at least you don't step into problems that you don't need to have. As the moon goes into Libra, now there is a bigger focus on relationships. But it's going to make this trine to Pluto. And a trine, again, is a positive, situation. Pluto's in Aquarius, power, fear, all that good stuff. But I look at Pluto in Aquarius as like, let's tap in to the more power side. The moon in Libra, trining Pluto, is like, who are the people that you have around you that can really benefit you? However, as the moon goes through Libra and makes its way to a conjunction with the south node, this might be having a call to help. Meaning, like, we can't do everything on our own all of the time. And that moon conjoining the south node is like, hey, I might have to call someone for help. Like, have you ever been in a situation where, like, you need your parents' help and you don't want to fucking call them, or you don't want to tell them that they're right, but they were? That's kind of like the moon conjoining the south node in Libra is like, you were right. Like, I shouldn't have done that. I need some like help getting out of this situation, or I could use your advice on this. And oftentimes that involves us maybe being wrong about something. But that moon conjoining the south node in Libra just reminds me of, hey, you might have to bring up a relationship that may not be in like the moon conjoining the north node in Libra is like, I want these people, like, let me get your help. The moon conjoining the south node in Libra is on one part moving away from people's help, but I don't really see this as that time. There's a lot of air stuff going on. And I look at the moon conjoining the south node in Libra so much more as like, who can come into your life to assist you? And it may be involving you surrendering to the process and maybe just asking for help. And that's something hard to do. The sun's in Leo. We want to do it all of ourselves, but we are human beings. We have awesome relationships around us, and we have people that want to help us, just like you want to help other people that are around you. And then we get to Friday, and the moon's going to be in Libra, making a trine to Mars and Jupiter. And on my notes here, I just wrote something funny. So the one thing I'll put up is like this power through people. But the moon in Libra trining Mars and Jupiter and Gemini is reminding me when you tell your friend about a situation that you're in and they're more upset than you are about it. And I'm typically that friend. Like when people are like, oh, I'm going through this. I'm like, fuck that person. Like you need to blah, blah, blah. That's the mood. That's the energy that's going on right here. Is there's this relation to other people that's going on, right? The moon in Libra, but trining Mars, trining Jupiter and Gemini is this like, yeah, like what? You're the right person here. They're wrong. There's this hype hyped up energy that's going on. And that's why I made the note of like, there's power through people. Share your story with people. Don't be afraid to talk. Society doesn't want us to share. Society doesn't want us to connect right now. They want to, divide us in every single fucking way that they possibly can. And it's such bullshit. Like, however, when you go outside and you touch grass and you actually talk to people, there's so much to actually relate about. And that's what I really like about this transit on Friday. The other thing with the moon in Libra trining Mars and Jupiter is there is finding solutions through other people, right? Like moon's in Libra, you're sharing your story, you're talking to other people, and that Mars and Jupiter and Gemini might be like, oh, why don't you try this? Or have you thought about that? And you're like, no, I didn't think about that. Maybe that can actually help me in my situation. But Thursday and Friday, and a lot of Friday is really just kind of like using other people, and don't get hung up on that word using, but like having other people help you in figuring out other solutions and other opportunities to fix your problems. But then we get into Saturday, and the moon is going to ingress into Scorpio, and it's going to then make a square to Pluto. Then later on throughout the day, the moon, while it's in Scorpio, is going to make a sextile to Mercury. Going to be moody. You're just going to be moody. That's just how it is. I don't mind the moon being in Scorpio. I mean, it goes through my 12th house, so it does kind of suck a little bit more for me. Yeah, I win there. But the moon in Scorpio is just, you're just going to be moody. You're going to be a little bit bitter. And that moon in Scorpio squaring Pluto is going to be like tension around those relationships. Like Pluto and Aquarius it reminds me of, because of everything that's happened in the, political world and everything that's going on. I am on Twitter. I'm not on Twitter for astrology. I literally have like an account that's just a bunch of numbers. Like I look like a bot account and I just read stuff. And it's so like the absolute garbage that is on that website. Half of it's bots and the other half is just rage bait. And it's so like, it's disgusting. I can't be on that. That's why I like Instagram. Instagram is just people being like, funny brain rot jokes. And then like, here's my life in Bali and stuff like that. Like it's very calming on the nerves. And that moon in Scorpio squaring Pluto just reminds me of like, you're just scrolling too long, you're consuming too much information, and you get that bitter resentment feeling going on. Now, when the moon is in Scorpio and making that sextile to Mercury, just use that as a time to focus. Like I always do best when I kind of get to a point where it comes to taking in information and I just get annoyed, I get frustrated, I just throw my phone. I don't actually throw my phone. But when I don't check notifications, when I don't check what's going on the news or YouTube, and I just focus in on my work, especially if I got something else going on in my life or I'm upset about something else, I could channel that into my work and I feel so much better. And whatever that work is, it doesn't have to be your actual job. It can literally be just like, hey, I need to go through my files. I need to reorganize something. The moon in Scorpio sextiling Mercury, what I like about this is that bitter energy can be channeled into whatever the Mercury retrograde issue is for you. Like being able to say, you know what, I'm going to figure out a solution for this. You know what, I'm going to change my game plan. And then we get to Sunday, and the moon is going to make a sextile to Venus, while again, the moon is still in Scorpio, Venus is in Virgo. And that's all about we have on Sunday, which is nice. Use the disgust to enjoy the enjoyable. Channel your emotions through things you don't like. This reminds me of just like being like, I fucking love the stupid saying, I'm here, I'm queer. It's so funny. But it's such also like a good affirmation to just use, like, just accept it. Like, this is how things are, and you're going to have to fucking deal with it. Now with the moon in Scorpio, well, the reason I bring up the use disgust to enjoy the enjoyable is like, hey, you're already uncomfortable. Sunday's not a day where you're going to just be like, oh, let me just relax and be uncomfortable. There's going to be an uncomfortable feeling about it, but use that to your advantage. Venus is in Virgo. You're not going to really find all of that much of the pleasure that you're really looking for anyway. So tap into that, right? Just like, for example, I talked last week about my birthday and I went to the Yampa Vapor Caves here in the middle of Colorado. And it was literally so uncomfortable for me at first. But the more that I just let into it and got into it, and again, it's like this smelly sulfur cave. Like it smells fucking gross. There's people sweat and there's just liquid everywhere. It was so uncomfortable. But because of that, I was able to enjoy it so much more versus being like, ew, there's gross people's bodies here. And, all that stuff. I just didn't worry about that. I just enjoyed it and I got this purge out of it. It felt so good afterwards. So that's how I want you to like look at this moon in Scorpio with Venus and Virgo and Mercury retrograde in Virgo energy going on. And here's the deal. This week isn't really the week. We have the moon now waxing. It's building up for things during this time. And then after that, it's this next week where things really get crazy, and the week after that. Because next week, we have Mars conjoining Jupiter. We have Mercury, still retrograde, going back into Leo. We have Mars squaring Saturn. boy, if you guys didn't know frustration, when Mars squares Saturn, you're going to feel it. Add that to Mercury making a square to Uranus to add more frustration. We have then the Mercury Cazimi. At least we figure out what the problem was in the first part and have the solution. And we have Venus squaring Jupiter at the very, very end of next week. This week, if you think this week is going to be frustrating, it's really going to be fucking nothing compared to the next 2 weeks. But again, I'm not saying that to say like, oh, you need to be worried or you need to be this. It's that like, hey, if you know things aren't going to go according to plan, why are you so worried about them going according to plan? Really, think about that for a second. If you know things aren't going to go the exact way that you want them to, are you going to have these high expectations that they are going to? And so then when they don't go to your plans, even though you knew that wasn't going to happen, you're going to have this whole spiraling event. Just know that things are going to be crazy. But this is a big pivot. August is a pivot into the rest of the next 6 months, essentially. So with that being said, I want you guys to lock in this week, deal with it, have that strength and that resilience because it's going to be needed for the next 2 weeks. Let me know in the comments below what you're looking forward to the most, what you're not looking forward to. And honestly, in the comments below, I want to challenge you guys. Like, what is the situation that you're going through? And how are you going to look at it in a different light? How are you going to let this be fun? How are you going to let this be able to roll off your shoulders and be able to be maneuverable during this time? That's the other thing. Virgo, Gemini, Pisces, these are mutable signs. They are adaptable. They're not fixed signs where they're supposed to be rigid. They are adaptable. You need to be able to adapt this week and you need to be able to overcome. That's what I got for you guys this week. Thank you guys so much for liking this video, watching, commenting below, and I'll be seeing you guys next week.